Business Now is brought to you by the Information Technology Association of America. Business development, networking, and public policy leadership for today's IT industry. And in part by CGI, Experience the Commitment. And cooperation with the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and Maryland Public Television.
Welcome to BusinessNOW Capital Edition. I'm Gary Nurienberg with another report on how the partnership between the public sector and private business is solving tough problems and powering the economy of the greater Washington-Baltimore area. We often hear about what's wrong with the way government does business, but in this edition of Business Now, we'd like to examine some notable success stories. It's easy to forget that the government employs about 20 million people when you combine our federal, state, and local governments. To put that in perspective, the Fortune 500 employs about 3 million people in total. The big picture, as seen by government, Congress, the academic world, and the IT industry. This is the first in a series of Tech Talk roundtables moderated by the President and CEO of the Information Technology Association of America. Here's Phil Bond.
America's public sector has always needed support from its private sector, the best and the brightest. Nothing drove that point home like the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001. In the years since, the government has redoubled its efforts to tap industry's best and brightest minds, particularly in the area of information technology. George Mason University Center for Regional Analysis estimates that the ramp-up in procurement since 9/11 has generated 95,000 new jobs for the Washington area economy. The greater Washington-Baltimore IT industry now generates more than $51 billion in output each and every year. Welcome to this week's Roundtable, where we will explore this phenomenon and what it means for the area's economy and the country in general. Joining me today are Congressman Jim Moran, representing Virginia's 8th District, Karen Evans, Administrator of E-Government and IT at the Office of Management and Budget, Greg Baroni, President of Unisys Incorporated's Global Public Sector Business Unit, and Dr. Stephen Fuller, Director of the Center for Regional Analysis at George Mason, and an authority on the metro area economy. Dr. Fuller, let's start with you. Those are some pretty startling numbers, some big numbers. What does it mean for the area's economy?
Well, as we all know, the Washington area is driven by federal spending. Procurement spending is the largest component of federal spending. It's roughly a third of the economy. And so as federal spending has grown here, driven by procurement, increases in procurement spending, this economy has outperformed every other metropolitan area in the country since the year 2000.
So I guess, Karen, policy matters, and there's got to be a policy driving this from the administration and the Office of Management and Budget. What is that perspective?
Well, we really look at, from the administration's viewpoint, in the president's budget, we spend $65 billion on information technology. So the basic philosophy—
That's an annual number.
That's an annual number that we spend. And so what we think is that the American people expect us to be the best at it. And so it isn't so much us doing it ourselves, but relying and looking toward private industry for solutions, because we should really be focused on what are the core mission areas, program results that we need to deliver for the American people while using information technology to enhance that.
And what kinds of things, really post 9/11, what kinds of things were driving some of this? What were the needs and the mission?
Well, you know, to use the buzz term, the common phrase that you hear all the time is the ability to communicate, interoperability. To have that at multiple levels, not just within the federal government itself from all the agencies that need to work together, but all the way down to the state and local government. And that drives a lot of potential solutions that the federal government needs to make sure that they have in place.
Very good. Well, state and local, that kind of takes me to you, Congressman Moran, because you represent a number of the communities that have these employees in them, that also have the government employees working on that. And I need to say, along the way, you won a reputation in the IT industry as one of the few members in Congress who really understands the capabilities of technology. How has this shift affected the communities you represent?
You began this discussion by citing the fact that the information technology contracting industry needs the very best and brightest in our country, actually on our planet. But we also need the best and brightest in the federal workforce. There needs to be a balance. I'm not sure that we're really getting or able to retain the best and brightest in the federal workforce for reasons of salary compensation, upward mobility opportunities, innovative challenges. We are not achieving that balance, in my opinion.
Greg, tell us a little bit about the number of jobs and the impact that this trend has had on Unisys.
Yeah, I mean, Unisys has had considerable growth over the past few years, and it's allowed us to direct our energies around the core mission that Karen just referenced in Homeland Security. And we've done a number of things there, from helping stand up a new agency, TSA, to helping a new department organize itself, the Department of Homeland Security, and bringing all the weapons that we bring to bear. As Karen pointed out, there are only so many resources that the federal government can focus, and they've elected to focus in on core mission areas that allow the private sector to complement them. So we're working in a public-private partnership, if you will, with the government in certain core mission areas.
What are a couple of the more technical areas where you might come alongside and provide some real special expertise?
Well, as Karen pointed out, one of those areas is interoperability. And it's not just vertically, it's horizontally. How do they reach out? And there are technical solutions. There are cultural issues, but there are technical issues that can be addressed. And in fact, in Miami, we were able to demonstrate a solution that won an award down there for interoperability.
As a result of the 9/11 Commission, there were very specific recommendations that the administration embraced and went forward on. One dealt with enhancing the security of our federal buildings and ensuring that the people who we're giving credentials to are really the people that should be getting credentials, whether you're a contractor or a federal government employee.
And by security, you don't mean just physical security.
No, this is physical security, this is logical security onto the computers, and then this is also then maximizing investments that agencies had already started and not really going down and having 3 separate paths like they normally did. They would have one for physical access, they would have one for logical access, getting right onto the computers, and then you'd have your HR people trying to figure out who everybody is. This initiative brought everyone together. We call it's Homeland Security Presidential Directive 12, but the technology didn't exist. So the government was very clear as to what the requirements were, and industry, I would say, clearly partnered with us.
I've got a bill, and I'm describing it to Jim Webb because I'd like this to occur in Northern Virginia, of course, so I have a little parochial interest, but it's to establish a public service academy akin to what we do with the military service academies, so that we can start preparing folks for the federal sector, a management class, if you will, that they're ready to hit the road when they graduate, but they would spend a fair amount of time working in the nonprofit and governmental sector while they're going to college. I think we need that. We've got to figure out a way to be competitive with the private sector.
What would that mean for you, Greg, if the government folks, some of whom you hire out of government to your companies, had a little bit more competitive compensation? What does that do to your marketplace?
I think it still comes down to creativity around job enrichment and other things that this next generation of workforce is coming into. So I think it's very important that the compensation system be reformed. It will create a more level playing field, but I think it's a broader issue. It's a more holistic ecosystem around how do you deal with the employee of the future.
Well, Karen, you're with the Office of Management, so...
Well, and so dealing with training the workforce and getting them going forward, the CIO Council, the Chief Information Officers Council, that was codified by the Gov Act, actually has recognized this way back to the Klinger-Cohen Act, which was 1996. So we identified several categories. We have 4 major categories that we know we have major skill gaps in. And what we have is what is along the concept of what you just described. We have a CIO university, and that what that does is we have agreements in place with all the universities here throughout the area. And so people go in and they get a degree. and information technology and becoming what it means to become a CIO, to be able to manage the workforce, to be able to manage these projects. So like, for example, University of Maryland offers several courses, and they go through a very specific curriculum.
What keeps us from trying market rates for government managers?
I think that if we were to pay the competitive salaries that the private sector is able to pay, that there would be an adverse reaction on the part of the taxpayer.
National challenges, education challenges, local community and transportation challenges, commercial challenges, and certainly policy and politics as well. But I guess in a sense we end up where we began. Despite the challenges, it has to be done because we have these critical missions of securing the homeland, for one, and our national security that really rise and fall on our ability to get the best information and the best information technology. Let me thank each of you for being part of this first roundtable and give you a chance for any closing comments that any of you might have. Congressman?
We need to, as a nation, to attract, as you began, the best and brightest people. Technology is where it is. From an economic standpoint, you develop a product and every additional unit costs less. So we need to expand to the rest of the world in terms of our marketplace. But realizing this scientific, this innovative opportunity that is there if we have the right people to exploit it, is what we have got to be about, not just as an economy, but as a society, as a polity.
I do think that, again, technology is just a means to an end, and that it's really about the results that we need to achieve for the American people. And using the taxpayers' dollars wisely and not doing the same thing over and over again.
We've been blessed to create product for the American economy. As we transformed into a services company, now we're bringing those talents to bear and benefiting the American public. And we're delighted to be a steward and a service to service the American economy.
Dr. Fuller, any closing thoughts?
Well, I think we've had an excellent discussion, identified some challenges of the future. What we haven't talked about, what I think is really important, is the technology services that the federal government buys here tend to solve new problems. These are problems that haven't been addressed by local government, state governments, other country governments. This, in fact, in the Washington area is the largest research and development program in the country. And it shows up as contracts. We don't think of it as R&D. And yet, we're applying new technologies to solve difficult problems.
Well, thank you all, and thank you for watching, and please join us again on our future roundtable.